The evening air was calm, and Keanu Reeves sat quietly in his living room, surrounded by the quiet hum of a home that felt far too large for one man. Outside the window, the sun was sinking slowly, casting a warm orange light over the hills. His life, from the outside, looked perfect. A famous actor, respected around the world, admired for his humility and kindness. But inside, he carried a deep loneliness. Memories filled his thoughts, memories of people he had lost. His father, who left when he was young. His best friend River Phoenix, gone too soon. His daughter who died at birth. And Jennifer, the woman he had loved, taken from him in a tragic accident. Each loss had shaped him, made him quiet and thoughtful, kind and careful with others. Though surrounded by fame and fortune, his heart had learned to live with grief. Then, just as he was finishing a cup of tea, there was a soft knock at his front door. Not loud or urgent, just a quiet, almost hesitant sound. When he opened the door, no one was there. Only a plain envelope sat on the doorstep, resting there as if it had been waiting patiently for him to find it. He bent down, picked it up, and studied it carefully. No return address, no fancy handwriting, just his name written simply on the front. Something about the envelope felt different. He sat down slowly at the kitchen table and opened it with care. Inside was a single sheet of paper, handwritten, the letters slightly shaky, as if the writer had been nervous while writing it. Dear Keanu, my name is Matthew. I believe I am your brother. I did not know about you until recently, when my mother told me as she lay dying. She told me our father, Sam Reeves, had another family, and that you were my brother. All these years, I felt something missing in my life. Now I understand why. I have watched your films, felt a strange connection, without knowing the truth. I have nothing to ask from you, only this: if you wish to meet, please call me. Here is my phone number. I would be honored to meet you, but if you cannot, I understand completely. Sincerely, Matthew. Keanu read the letter twice, then a third time. The words felt heavy, almost surreal. A brother? For so many years, he had believed he was alone, that his father's disappearance had closed the door to that part of his life forever. His mind rushed through memories of his father, memories that were few and far between. His father had drifted out of his life when Keanu was just a boy, and after that, silence. No contact, no explanations, just emptiness where a father's love should have been. But now this letter told a different story. What if his father had started another life? What if there was a brother he had never known? Who was Matthew? What kind of man was he? Was this some kind of mistake? Was it a cruel trick? But beneath all the confusion, another feeling stirred inside Keanu: curiosity, and something deeper than that, hope. A part of him longed for connection. He had lived so long carrying grief with quiet dignity, treating everyone he met with respect and kindness because he knew what it felt like to hurt. But here was a chance, however small, to discover family, to heal a wound he didn't even know was still open. He sat at the table through the night, the letter resting gently on the wood beside him. He barely moved, lost in thought as the hours passed. Memories of childhood, questions about his father, and now images of this man called Matthew all swirled in his mind. Was this his chance to discover something beautiful in the middle of so much loss? As the first light of morning crept into the room, Keanu made his decision. Slowly, deliberately, he picked up his phone and dialed the number written at the bottom of the letter. The phone rang twice before a soft voice answered. Hello? The voice said gently. Keanu swallowed, his heart racing. This is Keanu, he said softly. A long pause followed, and then a quiet, almost breathless laugh. You really called, the voice said, filled with emotion. I wasn't sure I would, Keanu admitted honestly. But I couldn't ignore your letter, I had to know. The two men spoke for nearly an hour, their conversation quiet but full of feeling. Matthew told him about his life, working as a mechanic in a small town outside Vancouver, a simple, humble existence. He had never married, had no children. He spoke with warmth and kindness, and something in his voice felt familiar, as if Keanu had known him for years, even though they had never met. At the end of the call, Matthew said, "I understand if you don't want to meet me, I really do. I just needed to know you were out there." Keanu's voice broke slightly as he replied, "I want to meet you. I think I need to." They agreed that Keanu would visit the next week. No media, no cameras, just a private meeting between two brothers, separated by fate but brought together. By this letter. When Keanu hung up, he sat quietly again, but this time the silence felt different. For the first time in a long while, he felt something new, hope. Fear and uncertainty were still there, but so was hope, the hope that maybe he was not alone after all, that maybe there was still family to discover, still kindness to share. His life was about to change. And he could feel it. What he didn't know was that this meeting would become one of the most emotional and meaningful journeys of his entire life. A journey filled with love, pain, truth, and healing. The days that followed the phone call felt slow but heavy with meaning. Keanu Reeves tried to go about his usual life, reading scripts, walking his dog, visiting a small cafe he liked, but his mind kept drifting back to Matthew's voice. It was strange how familiar that voice felt after just one conversation. Soft, humble kind. It carried a weight. Keanu understood. The quiet pain of someone who had lived a hard life, but chose to carry it with grace. As the day of the meeting approached, Keanu arranged everything carefully. He didn't tell his manager or his assistant where he was going. He wanted this to stay private, personal. No cameras, no news stories, no interviews. This was not for the world to see. This was for him and for Matthew. When the morning of the trip came, Keanu packed lightly and dressed simply. A plain shirt, worn jeans, sunglasses to avoid attention. He boarded a small flight to Vancouver and from there rented a modest car to drive north toward the small town Matthew called home. The scenery along the way was beautiful. Mountains rising in the distance, forests stretching for miles, quiet lakes reflecting the sky. But his thoughts stayed inward. Every mile brought him closer to a truth. He wasn't sure he was ready. He wondered what Matthew would look like. Would they share the same eyes, the same smile? Would they recognize something in each other instantly? Or would they feel like strangers brought together by accident? What would they talk about? How would they fill the years that had passed between them? As he drove into the small town, Keanu felt a wave of nervous energy. It was not the nerves of an actor before a performance, or the tension of walking a red carpet. This was different. This was raw, personal, unknown. He found Matthew's house easily. It was a modest, weathered place with a small garden in front. The garden was surprisingly well cared for, with bright flowers blooming in neat rows. It felt warm, humble, alive. He sat in the car for a moment, staring at the house, feeling the weight of this moment. Then, with a deep breath, he stepped out and walked slowly toward the door. Before he could knock, the door opened quietly. There stood Matthew. He was thinner than Keanu expected, his hair streaked with gray, his face lined with time and hard work. But his eyes were kind, gentle, and in that instant, Keanu saw something familiar. It wasn't exactly like looking in a mirror, but there was a connection, an invisible thread tying them together. "Keanu?" Matthew asked softly. Keanu nodded. He felt his throat tighten. No words came at first. Then Matthew stepped forward and opened his arms. Without hesitation, Keanu embraced him. It was a quiet, simple hug, but it held years of absence, years of unspoken pain, and years of longing. They didn't speak right away. They just held each other, two men who had walked different roads but who were now, finally, standing in the same place. When they stepped inside, Keanu noticed how simple the house was. Worn furniture, an old wooden table, shelves filled with books and small objects that told stories of a life lived quietly. Family photos lined one wall. Photos of Matthew as a boy, of his mother, of moments that Keanu had never been part of. "You have a beautiful home," Keanu said gently. "Thank you," Matthew replied. "It's simple, but it's mine. I like to keep it peaceful." They sat at the kitchen table, and for a moment, they just looked at each other, both unsure of where to begin. Then Matthew smiled, a small, shy smile. "You must have questions," he said. Keanu nodded slowly. "I do. But I don't know how to ask them," Matthew nodded back. "Me too." The honesty in that simple exchange made them both laugh quietly, breaking the tension. And so they began. They spoke about their childhoods. Matthew's life was very different. He never had much money, worked in garages since he was a teenager, raised by a single mother who worked long hours as a nurse. But he spoke of his mother with love, respect, and gratitude. She had done her best, even while carrying the secret of Keanu's existence. Keanu listened carefully, feeling respect grow for this brother he had only just met. Matthew had lived a humble life, marked by hard work and quiet kindness. There was no bitterness in his voice when he spoke of their shared father, no anger, only acceptance. Then Matthew said something that caught Keanu by surprise. "I'm sick," Matthew said quietly. Keanu single quotes S heart stopped for a moment. "How sick?" "The doctors say it might be cancer. We don't know yet how far it's spread." Keanu reached across the table and placed a hand gently over Matthew's. "I'm here now," he said softly. "We'll face this together." Matthew smiled again, his eyes shining with emotion. "You're a good man, Keanu," he said. "I've always felt that, even before I knew you were my brother." Those words touched Keanu deeply. All his life, he had tried to live with respect for others, to treat everyone with kindness, even when his own heart was heavy with grief. Hearing those words from Matthew made him feel seen, understood, in a way that few people ever had. They sat there for hours, talking, laughing gently, sharing small memories, and slowly filling in the gaps of years lost. Outside, the sun moved slowly across the sky, and the quiet town went about its day, unaware that in this small house, two brothers were building something precious: connection, trust, and hope. Keanu realized that this journey was not just about meeting Matthew. It was about healing, about finding pieces of himself he didn't know were missing, and about offering love and support to someone who had always been part of his story, even if he didn't know it. As evening fell, Keanu made a quiet promise to himself. He would not let Matthew face this illness alone. He would stay. He would be a brother, truly, fully, completely. And for the first time in a long time, Keanu felt that maybe he was exactly where he was meant to be. The next morning, Keanu woke early, sunlight peeking through the thin curtains of the small guest room where he had stayed. For years, his mornings had begun in hotels, trailers, or quiet Hollywood homes. But this felt different. The air was still, filled with the sounds of birds and distant wind chimes, and he felt strangely peaceful. Though the house was modest and the room simple, he felt comfortable here, almost as if this place had been waiting for him. When he walked into the kitchen, Matthew was already there, quietly making coffee. He looked tired but smiled when he saw Keanu. "You're up early," Matthew said softly. "Couldn't sleep much," Keanu admitted. "Me neither," Matthew replied, pouring 2 cups. They sat together at the small table, sipping coffee in silence at first. But it was a good silence, a silence that felt safe, like two people sitting side by side, not needing to fill the space with noise. After a while, they began to talk, slowly but with honesty. Matthew told Keanu more about his life, working long hours at the garage, fixing old cars for neighbors who couldn't afford fancy repairs. He spoke of his love for simple things: gardening, old records, and evenings spent reading by the fire. His words revealed a man who had lived quietly but with kindness, who had carried burdens but never let them make him bitter. Keanu listened carefully, feeling a deeper respect for Matthew with every story he shared. Here was a man who had grown up with hardship but had chosen a path of dignity and generosity. There was no envy in his voice, no resentment about Keanu's fame or success. Only warmth. In return, Keanu shared his own life, not the glamorous parts, but the private ones. His grief, his loneliness, the way he tried to live gently despite the pain he carried. He spoke of his love for motorcycles, books, quiet walks, and the way he found peace in small things. Matthew listened with care, never interrupting, his eyes soft and understanding. As the day passed, they fell into an easy rhythm. They worked together in the garden, pulling weeds and planting flowers, their hands dirty but their hearts lighter. Neighbors walked by and waved politely, some recognizing Keanu but respecting his privacy, sensing that something meaningful was happening here, and it was. These small, quiet hours were building something strong between the brothers, a bond that felt natural, as if it had always been there, just waiting to be found. That evening, after dinner, Matthew grew quiet. Keanu noticed the shadow that crossed his face and asked gently, "What is it?" Matthew hesitated, then spoke slowly. "I went to the doctor last week, before I sent that letter to you. They said it's cancer, advanced. They're not sure how long I have." The words hung heavy in the room. Keanu felt his heart tighten. He reached across the table and placed his hand gently on Matthew's. "We'll go together," he said quietly. "To the doctor. I'll help you through this." Matthew's eyes filled with tears, but he smiled softly. "I didn't expect you to come, Keanu. I needed you to know I existed. I never thought you'd actually come here, sit at this table, drink coffee with me, plant flowers in my yard. I never thought I'd feel like I had a brother." Keanu's own eyes grew damp as he listened. He squeezed Matthew's hand gently. "You do have a brother," he said, "and I'm here, for as long as you need." In that moment, something deep and powerful passed between them, a connection made not from shared childhood memories or family gatherings, but from something stronger, choice. Both had chosen to show up for each other, despite the years apart and the pain they both carried. As night settled around the small house, they sat quietly, watching the stars appear one by one in the dark sky. Keanu felt a strange peace settle over him, a feeling he had not known in many years. For the first time in a long while, he felt like he belonged somewhere, not because of fame or success, but because of simple human connection. The next day would bring doctor visits and difficult conversations, but tonight, they shared this moment of calm. Two brothers, two lives. Finally together. The next morning arrived gently, sunlight warming the kitchen where Keanu sat, waiting quietly for Matthew to wake. He had slept little, his mind full of thoughts and emotions he could not easily name. Everything about this visit felt heavy but beautiful, like holding something fragile that mattered deeply. And now today would bring the hardest part yet. They were going to the doctor together when Matthew appeared, his face pale but smiling faintly. Keanu rose and poured him coffee without a word. Their bond had grown stronger in these few days, a quiet understanding passing between them that didn't always need words. They sat together, sipping in silence, each preparing in their own way for what lay ahead. After breakfast, Keanu offered to drive. Matthew nodded gratefully and handed him the keys to an old truck that rattled slightly as they drove down the narrow roads toward the small-town clinic. During the ride, they talked about ordinary things, the weather, the flowers in Matthew's garden, a song playing softly on the radio, but underneath it all was a quiet tension. Neither wanted to speak the fear aloud, though they both felt it. When they arrived at the clinic, Keanu stayed close to Matthew, his presence steady and calm. Inside, the doctor greeted them kindly but with serious eyes, inviting them into his small office. Matthew sat down slowly, glancing at Keanu, who gave him a gentle nod, silently reminding him that he was not alone. The doctor spoke gently but directly. Tests had confirmed that the cancer had spread. It was advanced. Treatment could help ease the symptoms, but might not stop the disease. Time was uncertain, maybe months, maybe less. Keanu listened carefully, watching Matthew's face as he absorbed the news. There was sadness there, but also a kind of peace, as if he had already prepared himself for this truth. What struck Keanu most was that Matthew showed no bitterness. Instead, he thanked the doctor quietly for his honesty, then turned to Keanu and said softly, "Well, brother, looks like we have some time, but not forever." The words cut deep into Keanu's heart, but he met Matthew's gaze with quiet determination. "Then we'll make this time count," he replied simply. After the appointment, they drove back in silence for a while. Then Matthew spoke softly, breaking the quiet. "I've always dreamed of seeing the ocean one more time," he said. "I haven't been in years. I used to go when I was younger, just sit there for hours, listening to the waves." Keanu smiled gently. "Then we're going," he said without hesitation. Matthew laughed quietly. "You don't have to do that. I know you have a life too. Get back to movies, meetings, your work." Keanu shook his head. "None of that matters right now. You're my brother. This is where I want to be." Those words meant more to Matthew than Keanu could know. All his life, Matthew had felt like an invisible man, working hard, living quietly, never asking much from the world. And now, in these last precious days, here was his famous brother, a man admired by millions, choosing to sit beside him, choosing to share this simple, difficult journey. When they returned home, Keanu suggested they plan the trip right away. "Let's not wait," he said gently. "Let's go tomorrow." Matthew smiled, tears shining in his tired eyes. "You're really serious?" "Absolutely," Keanu replied. "We'll drive down the coast, take our time, enjoy every moment." That evening, they sat together once more in Matthew's small garden, surrounded by flowers gently swaying in the breeze. They shared stories, some sad, some funny, and laughed quietly at memories they didn't even realize they both shared. Simple things about their father, strange habits and small details that connected them in surprising ways. Keanu felt his heart open more. With every hour, he realized that despite the short time they had known each other, this bond felt strong, real, honest. Matthew was not just his brother by blood. He was his brother by choice, by kindness, by shared respect and quiet understanding. Before they went to bed that night, Matthew turned to Keanu and said softly, "Thank you for coming here. Thank you for seeing me. You could have ignored that letter, gone on with your life, but you didn't. You came." Keanu placed a hand gently on Matthew's shoulder. "There's nowhere else I'd rather be," he said honestly. In that moment, both men felt the depth of what they had found. Not just family, but healing. The next day, they would leave for the ocean. The journey ahead would be beautiful, emotional, and full of quiet moments that neither would ever forget. Keanu knew that every moment with Matthew mattered now. And he promised himself silently that no matter how hard it became, he would walk beside his brother until the very end. The road to the ocean stretched long and winding, but for Keanu and Matthew, every mile was precious. They left early, just after sunrise, the old truck humming gently beneath them. The windows were rolled down, letting the cool morning air rush in, carrying with it the scent of pine and fresh earth. The sky was clear, a deep blue that seemed to promise them something good. This was not a journey about distance, but about time they knew was slipping away. Time they would not waste. Matthew sat quietly in the passenger seat, his face pale but peaceful. Every so often, he would glance at Keanu, as if still surprised that this was really happening, that his famous brother, the man he had watched on screen for years, was now right here, driving him toward the place he loved most. There was humility in his eyes, a deep gratitude that didn't need to be spoken. That Keanu glanced back at him often, feeling a strange warmth in his chest. This drive felt like more than a simple trip. It felt like a gift for Matthew, but also for himself. He realized how rare it was to have these quiet, shared hours, free from cameras, crowds, scripts, or schedules. Here, it was just them. Two brothers, no expectations, no past mistakes to fix, just the present moment. Along the way, they stopped at small roadside diners, sharing simple meals, laughing over old stories. Matthew would point out places from his youth, a field where he had played as a boy, a diner where he had worked as a teenager, a gas station where he had learned to fix cars. Each place carried a story, a memory, a piece of his life that Keanu was only now discovering. With every stop, Keanu felt closer to Matthew, more connected to this humble, kind man who had lived a quiet but full life. When they finally reached the coast, the ocean opened up before them in all its vast beauty. Waves crashed gently against the shore, the breeze carrying the salty scent of the sea, seagulls crying softly overhead. Matthew closed his eyes for a moment, breathing it all in, a soft smile on his face. "This is exactly how I remembered it," he said quietly. Keanu parked the truck and walked slowly with Matthew down to the sand. They kicked off their shoes and let the cold water wash over their feet. Matthew laughed softly, the sound light and pure, like a child's laugh. They sat down near the water, just sitting quietly, listening to the waves. No need for words. The ocean spoke for them, its endless rhythm a reminder of life's vastness, beauty, and impermanence. Keanu felt something deep and powerful in that moment, a peace he hadn't known in years. All the noise of his life seemed to fade away here. All that mattered was sitting beside his brother, feeling the breeze, watching the sun dip toward the horizon. As the day slowly slipped into evening, they lit a small fire on the beach. Matthew pulled out a worn old photo from his pocket, a picture of their father when he was young. He handed it to Keanu, who took it gently and studied it carefully. There, in the old photograph, was the man who had disappeared from both their lives, yet in a strange way had connected them. "He wasn't perfect," Matthew said quietly. "But he gave us something, didn't he? He gave us this moment." Keanu nodded slowly. "He did," he agreed. They sat by the fire until the stars appeared, bright and clear in the dark sky. Matthew leaned back, looking up at them, his face illuminated by the soft glow of the flames. "I used to wonder," Matthew said softly, "what it would be like to have a brother. I used to imagine we'd grow up together, play in the yard, fight, laugh, share secrets. I never thought I'd get even one day like this." Keanu felt a lump in his throat. He placed a hand gently on Matthew's shoulder and said simply, "We have today, and we'll have tomorrow too." Those words hung in the air, quiet but full of promise. The night grew colder, but they didn't leave right away. They stayed by the fire, sharing memories, hopes, fears. Keanu realized that this journey wasn't about making up for lost years. It was about honoring the time they had now. Every laugh, every glance, every word mattered. Finally, as the fire burned low and the wind picked up, Keanu helped Matthew to his feet and they walked back to the truck. Matthew leaned on him slightly, his strength fading but his spirit shining brightly. "Thank you," Matthew whispered as they reached the truck. Keanu smiled gently. "No, thank you," he replied, "for reminding me what really matters." That night, they found a small inn near the beach and stayed there, falling asleep to the sound of the waves outside. Keanu lay awake for a while, listening, thinking about all they had shared, all they had found. Despite the sadness of knowing their time was limited, he felt grateful, deeply grateful, for every moment they had been given. The next morning would bring more quiet conversations, more shared meals, more simple joys. Keanu promised himself He would stay by Matthew's side, all the way to the end. He would not let his brother feel alone. Not for one moment. This journey, this bond, it was the most important thing in his life now. The days that followed felt like a gift wrapped in soft, quiet moments. After their visit to the ocean, Keanu and Matthew returned to the small house that had become their shared sanctuary. Each day was simple but filled with meaning. They rose early, drank coffee together in the morning light, worked side by side in the garden, and shared quiet meals. They laughed often, even as they both knew that time was slipping away. There was no need to speak of it directly. The understanding was there, gently woven into every moment they shared. Keanu found himself slowing down in ways he hadn't done for years. No schedules, no urgent calls from agents or studios, no interviews or press events. Just life as it was meant to be, honest, raw, and full of human connection. He cherished the way Matthew's face lit up at small things. A bird landing on the fence, the first bloom of a flower they had planted together, a favorite song playing softly in the background. These were the moments that mattered now. At night, they would sit outside beneath the stars, sometimes speaking, sometimes simply sitting in silence. The air was cool, crisp, and peaceful. In those silences, Keanu felt something he hadn't felt in years, a sense of belonging. Not because of who he was to the world, but because of who he was to Matthew, a brother. But slowly, quietly, Matthew's body began to weaken. He grew tired more easily, sometimes needing help just to walk across the room. His face became pale and his breath shorter. Yet through it all, he remained kind, gentle, humble, never complaining, never angry. His spirit stayed strong, full of quiet grace. One evening, as twilight settled over the garden, Matthew sat in his favorite chair, a blanket wrapped around his shoulders. Keanu sat beside him, reading softly from an old book of poems. The sky was painted in colors of gold and purple, and for a long time, they just watched it together. Then Matthew spoke, his voice soft but clear. "I don't have much time left, brother. I can feel it." Keanu placed the book down slowly and turned to face him fully. "I'm here," he said gently. "I'm right here." Matthew smiled faintly, his eyes shining with both sadness and peace. "I never expected this," he whispered. "Never expected to find you. Never expected to have these days. You gave me something beautiful, Keanu. You gave me family." Tears filled Keanu's eyes, but he did not look away. He reached out and took Matthew's hand, holding it gently but firmly. "You gave me something too," he replied. "You reminded me what it means to be present, to truly be present for someone. I didn't even know how much I needed this until I met you." Matthew nodded slowly, closing his eyes for a moment, breathing in the cool evening air. "Promise me something," he said after a pause. "Anything," Keanu replied, his voice full of quiet resolve. "Promise me you'll keep living this way. That you'll stay close to the things that matter. Not the fame, not the noise, but kindness, connection, simplicity." Keanu felt his heart ache, but he nodded. "I promise." That night, Matthew slept peacefully, and Keanu stayed by his side, holding his hand, watching over him. The house was still. The only sound the soft wind moving through the trees outside. As dawn began to break, a soft light filling the room. Matthew took his final breath, his face peaceful, his hand still held gently in Keanu's. Keanu sat there for a long time, tears streaming down his face but his heart strangely full. He felt the weight of grief, yes, but also gratitude. Deep, pure gratitude for these days, for this bond, for this quiet journey that had brought healing to them both. In the days that followed, Keanu stayed in Matthew's house, tending the garden, walking the paths they had walked together. He kept his promise, choosing a life of humility, kindness, and connection, far from the noise of fame. Whenever he felt lost, he returned to this small house, sat in the garden, and remembered the brother he had found late but loved deeply. Matthew had come into his life unexpectedly, through a simple letter that changed everything. And though their time together had been short, it was filled with honesty, love, and respect, the kind of connection that can heal even the deepest wounds. Keanu knew he would carry this bond with him for the rest of his life, quietly but fully, honoring the promise he had made. And whenever he stood at the ocean's edge, listening to the waves, he would smile softly, knowing Matthew was with him in spirit, forever.